Hi, I'm Ishariz. I teach religious studies at Sacred Heart Cathedral and I'm one of 3 Charism animators at our school. In this video, I'll discuss how the life and work of St. John Baptiste de La Salle is reflected by those affiliated with the De La Salle Christian Brothers today. Let's explore St. John Baptiste de La Salle. De La Salle lived a very full life, and in this video I'll discuss 4 main components of his life and work. First, let's talk about his upbringing and his call to educate the poor. John Baptiste de La Salle was born in privilege and had the luxury of a good education that enabled him to discover his passions. He was also very aware that God was calling him to become a priest, a journey that he started at the early age of 11. By the age of 15, he was working at the Archbishop's canonry and teaching Sunday school. By the age of 20, his parents had died and he inherited their wealth. And by the age of 27, he was ordained a priest. With his wealth and political influence, he was very much able to move among the upper echelons of the church and of society. However, God was calling him through some acquaintances and relatives to work with the poor through education. Thus, De La Salle began to use his wealth and influence to open some schools throughout France, and his mission began to take root. Second, let's talk about how De La Salle gathered his community of teachers. Opening schools for the poor was an interesting challenge and presented what we would call today a human resources nightmare. How would you be able to gather good teachers to teach these poor kids in France during that time? As you might imagine, the teachers who got those jobs then were not necessarily the top-notch teachers we expect to have in our schools today. They simply weren't that prepared to educate. As a matter of fact, those teachers were described by De La Salle's contemporaries as gamblers, drunkards, libertines, ignorant, and brutal. I mean, those things are kind of fun on a Friday night here and there, but you know what I mean. The first educators in the De La Salle schools needed more structure. So Jean-Baptiste de La Salle gathered them into a community and gave them some guidelines that would help them be more disciplined and also better teachers. And eventually these teachers became the first De La Salle brothers of the Christian schools. However, there was still a small issue. De La Salle was straddling 2 different worlds: the privileged world he was born into and inherited, as well as the underprivileged world of teachers and students that he was trying to serve. So he kind of had to make a decision, and after a lot of prayer and discernment, he decided to give up his wealth to the poor people in France and fully dedicate himself to formally founding the De La Salle Christian Brothers community. Looks like he gave in to all that drinking and gambling. I'm kidding, he was actually quite strict. And so De La Salle moved in with his brothers and formed a formal community. Third, let's discuss De La Salle's philosophy of education. De La Salle was very much in touch with the needs of the poor children in France, and he believed education was the key to providing these kids with a good life and the chance to get out of poverty. But most importantly, a good education will help the students understand their own faith, have a good relationship with God, and get into heaven. And so this philosophy of education, along with his own academic preparation, enabled St. John Baptiste de La Salle to come up with creative solutions to educate these kids. Most people are actually surprised to hear that De La Salle was actually quite the pioneer in education. De La Salle's plan actually introduced the one teacher, many students model for education. Before that, people were educated by a private tutor, which made the whole educational endeavor very expensive. Also, the De La Salle Christian Brothers instructed their kids in their vernacular tongue because they realized that these kids weren't going to be in school forever. So they might as well just teach them in French so they can learn something now. And that included religious education, which the brothers did not teach in Latin. Finally, these local schools were very good with discipline, which allowed their students to thrive and attracted kids from other areas. Fourth and finally, let's look at De La Salle's relationship with power. De La Salle recognized the influence money and power could have, but it also created barriers. So he opted to renounce that in order to rely on God's providence. Also, after establishing a community of brothers, he actually tried to step down to let another brother take his place as leader. Unfortunately, the local archbishop didn't like that because he didn't want a brother overseeing a priest. Nonetheless, this attempt showcases De La Salle's detachment from power, which is also seen when he distributed his wealth among the poor. Toward the end of his life, De La Salle gathered a general assembly to elect a successor, and they elected one of the brothers. So the De La Salle Christian Brothers are an order of brothers. There has not been a priest in the order since Jean Baptiste de La Salle. 2 years after stepping down, St. John Baptiste de La Salle died on Good Friday of 1719. And he was canonized in 1900 by Pope Leo XIII. And today, the impact of St. John Baptiste de La Salle is felt everywhere. He is the patron saint of teachers. The De La Salle Christian Brothers operate schools and universities in many countries throughout the world, and their education is special because it parts from the particular needs of the vulnerable people in that community. Like Jean-Baptiste de La Salle, the Christian Brothers have a particular self-sacrificial zeal for education, and they're committed to helping people in need, particularly poor students. LaSallian Education offers students the tools to live a good life and the opportunity to better understand their faith, have a good relationship with God, and enjoy God's rewards in heaven. Our LaSallian Charism combines structure with compassion, and it calls all educators to touch the hearts of the students by forming loving and compassionate relationships with them, while also holding them to high standards, because the students need to meet these standards if they are to live in the real world. In the same way that St. Jean-Baptiste de La Salle placed his trust in that unlikely group of teachers that formed the first brothers communities and the first schools, the brothers today place their trust on us, lay teachers, who reflect and animate the spirit of St. Jean-Baptiste de La Salle through our call as educators. All LaSallian educators, whether lay or religious, offer unique gifts to LaSallian education that allow us to touch the hearts of our students and through them transform the world. We are all called to be brothers, sisters, siblings to the children entrusted to our care.